welcome back to the Gen X Remix, Midlife Laughs and Next Acts. I'm your host, Tabatha Jones, the Corporate Escape Sherpa and Career Advancement and Leadership Coach. This show is all about helping bold Gen X women break the rules, rewrite their stories, and build a next act that actually fits. And today's episode, it's part tech, part heart, and completely unforgettable. I'm joined today by Cristian Ciblis, an engineer, AI innovator, and startup founder who's on a mission to preserve family legacies through his groundbreaking platform, Autograph. From his roots in Paraguay to building a deeply personal AI tool here in San Francisco, Cristian's remix is packed with purpose, legacy, and big questions about what it means to be remembered. If you've ever wished you could hear a loved one's voice again, or wondered how to make sure your story doesn't get lost, this one's going to hit home. Let's dive in. Cristian, welcome to the Gen X Remix. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Tabatha. It's awesome to be here.
Oh my gosh, I love a good story, and I think we're going to go pretty deep into yours today and learn a lot about what you do. Before we get going, I'd love for you to share with our listeners a bit about your remix story.
Sure, happy to. I grew up in Paraguay, which I think of Paraguay as the Shire of the world. A little bit more agricultural, a little bit more calm, very family oriented, very relationship driven. And I was lucky enough to be born to a household of two entrepreneurs. My parents are both founders, and they're both computer scientists, which is extremely rare in Paraguay. And my mom is the CEO, and my dad's the CTO. There's a very unique upbringing. There really isn't a tech scene in Paraguay. And I think the best part about it was watching them try and try and try. And for most of my growing up, they were trying, whatever it was that was the new idea, selling Microsoft software, box software, or, word processor for notary services. And when I was about 14, they realized that SMS was going to be a thing. And so they started building out SMS infrastructure for the telcos of Latin America. And that completely changed our outlook 100%, made us think a bit more global. I was fortunate enough to apply to school in the US, and by some miracle, the stars aligned, and was privileged enough to get into Stanford. Completely changed my life. And so I knew I wanted to study something computer science related, but I also always saw computer science as a how more so than a why. And I wanted to have a clear why. And at Stanford, there's this interesting major called symbolic systems that is a blend of computer science and psychology, philosophy, and linguistics. And it is just the exact Venn diagram of all of the things that I'm interested in. It touches on economics, it touches on how people behave and what people feel and the relationship between minds and machines. And obviously, AI is at the center of that. And so I concentrated in AI. And then I turned that into a job at Google. So I was an engineer at Google for 4 years, where basically doing anything from counting ads on Google Shopping to building an AI powered tutor for kids during the pandemic. Think of like a Snapchat kind of app that you take a picture of your homework and we would give you resources to help solve it. And super rewarding. The pandemic hits, and I thought the world was ending. My wife, now wife, was doing med school in Chicago, so I moved to Chicago, and I decided to join my parents' company that was pivoting from SMS tech business to be an investment firm to help empower the next generation of Paraguayan and Latin American entrepreneurs to build out their dreams. And it really is such a nascent ecosystem. Like whatever we see in Silicon Valley, think 30 years behind, something like that. So it really is a passion project. And obviously, it was a giant culture shock going from the corporate mothership of Google to the family business. But also really meaningful. A lot of conversations about meaning and legacy and how does our family grow up into the world, given that me and my sisters now kind of all live apart, far away from each other and far away from our parents. And so how do we continue this family tradition? Um, and At some point, my wife finishes med school. She gets matched to UCSF, so we moved back to San Francisco. The pandemic subsides and I need to reconnect with the city. And also, my parents, being the founder people that they are, would always say things like, you need to think like a founder and act like a founder.
Mm.
And I would at some point realize I don't know that I can simulate being a founder. I think I actually have to jump and do my own thing. And this was around the time that ChatGPT had just come out. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is the tool that is going to change the future. My goodness. And then sort of trying to predict where the puck was going in a couple of years. If I was hyping myself up to build something in AI, I wouldn't want to build something that would be really easily outcompeted by either the big AI companies or big tech in general. And so I took a moment, and this was probably the pivot point in life where just like hit the eject button. I was like, all right, I'm going to imagine the life that I want, and it's going to be a completely blank whiteboard. And I'm just going to picture whatever hopes I want for the future. What do I want my life to be? Um, and so I gave myself 3 months to figure it out. And I did not find the thing. But there was one thread that sort of kept, just like wouldn't die. That was this idea for a book that I had. The eve of my 30th birthday, I get this opening scene, and I'm hit with this curiosity. But what is this? What is going on here? Who are these characters? What are they trying to tell me? And that idea eventually became this really big project that essentially became a sci-fi story about what happens when you can create reality that will, and what happens when you can jump from one reality to another. Um, and it just became my passion project for all my philosophy. I was able to retell my life story. And most importantly, what I realized was, man, AI is going to take over the world. And the most impactful thing I can do with my time, I don't know how I'm going to monetize this, but if I can influence the mind of the machine to point toward a more utopian future and use my book as training data, that is what I hope to accomplish. And so that became the nerdiest excuse ever to write a sci-fi novel. And I'm still like reeling from all the stuff I found in that project. Um, and then I thought, okay, let's try and promote the book, get the word out there. And so I started my own podcast and the book also gave me an angle for a podcast, which was our humanity in the age of AI. What does this mean for jobs? What does this mean for families? What does it mean for our sense of self and like the ethics of it and art and culture? And I built this corpus of really amazing conversations with thought leaders, Stanford professors, venture capitalists, AI researchers, authors, poets. And at some point it dawns on me that the person I really should be interviewing is my grandma. My grandma has a crazy life story. Her dad was an MI6 agent. They had to flee Europe during the war, somehow ended up in Paraguay, of all places, and communicated over secret messages. And this is all like family mythology, but it was never documented anywhere. And so we set an interview, and very sadly, a few days before our interview, she has a stroke.
Oh, no.
And so there was a catalyst moment there where that is life on one side. I mean, it just happens. But on the other hand, I had the list of questions I knew I wasn't going to get an answer to. Um, and that prompted the reflection that led to the creation of what I'm doing now, called Autograph. We are building a digital historian called Walter, essentially an AI bot that calls you or a loved one once a week. Basically, we want to interview everybody on Earth about their life story, get their take on their own life story from the first person point of view. And with that data, we can do a bunch of things. For sure, we can just surface that as a time vault of things for the future. But one of the most exciting things we can do is we actually build a model of the people that sounds like them and speaks like them and has their memories, so that when the next generation is going through life, talking to Walter, dealing with their own life things, a job thing, a work thing, Walter can say, hey, actually, this reminds you of something your grandma went through. Would you like to speak with her for 15 minutes?
Wow.
And even if you're not around anymore, or even if you're incapacitated, or even if you're far away and scheduling is difficult, we are giving parents a way to say, I'm proud of you from the other side. And that's the remix story.
Oh my gosh, you hit on so many things that I'm just like, whew. I forgot to tell you at the beginning that we generally go down some rabbit trails. So we're going to hit a couple of those before we get all the way back
Good.
into your story here. So, oh my gosh, what a gift you are giving to people to be able to capture that family history. Start with the last and go backwards. Because I think about, just as you said that, about your grandmother and the MI6 history and the migrating to or immigrating to Paraguay and all of that. That's so profound. And I think as you said that, what kind of hit me is my great grandmother was Cherokee Indian, moved to the reservation in Oklahoma, no longer with us, of course.
Hmm.
What I would give to have her story and know really her life experience, especially as she then met my great grandfather, who was Irish and married him, and they moved out to California. And being able to get my grandmother's story, who's no longer here, right? Questions that we never asked. I think this is just such a gift. And as you talk about it, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, thinking, man, if only, I have a friend who she lives in Louisiana right now, a really dear friend who I've always said, you need to write a book. And I say that because she went to school as a Black child the first day of desegregation in the schools
Oh
in
my
Louisiana.
gosh.
And when I think about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a gift to your family, to the nieces, the nephews, the great nieces, the great nephews, to hear what the struggle was like and what you overcame. So that as they're living their lives and they're going through their own struggles, they can think back to, they call her Tea Cookie, Auntie Berta, but they call her Tea Cookie, and it's to think about, wow, if Tea Cookie could do this, if she overcame that, I can handle this. Let me just channel that inner Verna. Like, what did she do that day? Oh my gosh, so good. I'm
Hey,
not going to
thank
hit
you.
on
I mean,
every point,
no,
but
I know,
wow.
but I totally get it. And as someone who grew up in a different country and immigrated to the US, I feel a lot of cultural context that I'm going to have to pass on to my kids. My wife is American and from California. We're probably going to live here. So there's a lot of stories that I grew up immersed in that inform who I am and inform my worldview, and definitely have been key motivators for me when things got difficult. And so, uh, bearing that burden all by yourself it's an extremely tall order. And so building this system that can help index, like your family's lived experience and showcase it at the time when you need it most. When there's uncertainty in the business, when there's uncertainty in partnerships, when there's a romantic thing that needs to be figured out, and also some of the stories we know, some of the stories we never know. There's the unheard and unspoken stuff, that like the real feelings behind this event, or stuff that is just a little bit outside of our core family, like your second cousin may have a story about an immigration attorney that may actually be really beneficial to you to find out as you're doing something, Um, so a lot of these points resonate a lot, and one thing that you said, like I do think it's important to contextualize our struggles today in the context of the struggles yesterday,
Yeah.
just to give us a little bit of perspective in terms of what we're actually dealing with. And also, I think, with AI and, whatever's going on in the world geopolitically, macroeconomically, what have you, it looks like things are going to be very different. And
Yeah.
so preserving this story that we share so far, especially as some of these voices are quieting down, is just absolutely important to me. And I appreciate that you resonate with the idea.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it. I just can't even
Mm.
like the way this thought process even came to you. So I want to tap on the why because you mentioned getting
Yes.
clear on your why at the beginning. With my programs, that's where we start. What is your why? Why do
Mm.
you want to make this change? Why do you want to achieve this thing? Why is this so important to you?
Mm.
And why does it feel good to be doing that versus this? So you talked a little bit about how you got clear on your why, but what really came through as far as, I guess, your clarity as you were getting more clear over
Mm.
those 3 months? Like, what are the things that really stood out to you?
I made a very intentional exercise to have a robust checklist of what I wanted my primary occupation to be.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in terms of the activities, but in terms of the things like it needs to connect me to my family. It needs to connect me to my friends. It needs to be commercially viable so that I can make a living and, afford the opportunities that my parents afforded to me for my kids. It needs to, and just on and on and on. It needs to be spiritually rewarding. It needs to require stuff from me that I don't have yet that I hope to grow into. Um, and so the thing that surprised me was in this moment of pain and sadness that there was this kernel of light that all of a sudden checked all these boxes. And the more I looked into it, the more connected I felt, like this is, the tribute I pay to my grandma, and this is the gift I'm giving to the next generation. Um, and it forces me to be the best version of me that I can be. Like I'm essentially asking people to trust me with the stories that make them who they are. And so I need to be the trustworthiest individual in the world. And that's a task that I'm excited about. And it needs to be aligned, like there can't be any inconsistencies or hypocrisies along the way. And so that as a forcing function was really powerful. And then in terms of the creative stuff, I'm really excited about it. Like we live in a new kind of world where we can do all kinds of new experiences with AI, including talking to those who aren't here anymore. What else can we find along the way? And how else can we help people? Um, One of the things, this was sort of earlier on when I was deciding to write the book, was literally like I want to take charge of my own story. I want to be the author of my own fate. And I literally did that with literally writing my story. And I was like, man, this feels incredible to have this existential release. And I really am excited about Autograph being that for people, a tool for self-reflection and understanding the agency that they have in their own story, like the fact that they're framing things in a certain way, using certain language, and that they are characters in other people's stories, and that what they do will have a ripple effect in history. That who knows, like, and so far hasn't really been quantified. But for the first time ever, we can actually record and retell the history of humanity in every character's own words. Um, and so I feel so lucky that I found this thing that sits at the intersection of all my interests and abilities, and that I get to, and I have an earnest shot at doing.
Oh my gosh. It just makes me so happy just hearing the joy in your voice as you talk about it and your why and truly understanding how you put all those pieces together. It's so important for our listener because a lot of times, and I've been here, I'm sure you've been here, we feel like we're floundering a little bit or we're just so stuck. And whatever we're doing, it should feel good. Like I go back to my corporate job, right? I had a great job. I had
Mm.
great people working with me. I was making great money. I wasn't happy anymore. So there was a disconnect. And a lot of times we feel that disconnect and get just, oh, I just need to buckle down. I just need to push harder. And what happens then is we start getting more signs from our body and more signs from, the things around us. And the way that you approached your why, it is helpful, obviously, for the app that you've developed and this, but it's so helpful to our listeners as they may be feeling some of those internal struggles. I always say, get back to your why, start with your why and go forward from there. It's easy to get lost sometimes.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
pain is signal.
important.
I think that's such an important thing. Whether it is pain or suffering, or discontentment or boredom. That's where the information really is. And like the challenge is that we often want to ignore it or like hold it back or not look at it. But really sitting with it and really being like, oh, maybe I'm doing this because there's a part of me that is afraid that my story doesn't matter. And I'm like, ooh, sit with that one for a week, like, ooh, boy, so how do I make my story matter? Well, I don't know. Maybe there's a way to empower everybody to remember that their story matters and they are the main character in their own story. Um, and so the riches in the pain, I think, are so important. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, it sucks to go through pain.
It sucks to go through pain. And it sucks to feel like you're starting over sometimes because sometimes what you find as you dig in that why is you're way off track. Your why is over here and
Oh
you've
yeah,
gone all the way over here. And you're like, well, no wonder I feel sick. No wonder I constantly have acid reflux. No wonder I don't want to get out of bed every day. And working back to the why, it's uncomfortable, but it is 100% worth it. And you are literally living proof of it right now. So
oh,
thank you for sharing that
thank
story.
you. Of
So
course.
tell
Yes, go
tell
for it.
me a little bit about a little bit more about Autograph. I went out and kind of stalked the
Mm.
website a bit because I love AI. I can talk about it all day long. Chat GPT and I go back and forth. I apologize to it. It tells me no problem. Like we have those kinds of conversations. But tell me, who is coming
Mm.
to Autograph? Who are you attracting into that platform?
Yes. So our immediate most urgent target is the people who are aging or in more urgent circumstances in terms of the time that they've got. So really prioritizing the stories that won't be there to be captured in a few years. Um, but what we realize also is that there is a disconnect between those people and the ability to onboard into the service and to, essentially be tech savvy enough to sign up and get the ball rolling. And so we really market to their kids as a lifetime achievement award for their parents. Be it a Father's Day gift, a Mother's Day gift, a Thanksgiving gift, holidays, anniversary, what have you. And the idea being, like you want to capture your hero's story. It also makes it a little bit easier to not that it's an expensive service at all, but it's like $30 a month. But like if you need to pull in resources together, the kids can pay for mom and dad. Um, and then we have a couple of really interesting cases that, like, basically when we were starting the journey and seeing who gravitated to the platform, uh, the quality of the stories that we get and the reason why people chose us is so mighty. We have parents of autistic children who, this one particular uh, guy has a history of chronic heart disease. And, he has a 7 or 8 year old autistic son. And so, like, the degree of existential dread of being able to support it, just like, there are no words for that. And I don't know that there's like a quantifiable measure of this, what it means to have the service for them. um, but for us, it's just such an empowering thing that, like, this is a valid, valuable emotional service that we're providing. Um, we also have a user who's maybe in his 80s, who had just undergone uh, Parkinson's surgery. And so, the brain stimulation implant, and had a really hard time expressing himself, like stutter a good amount. So, feels a lot of shame trying to communicate, doesn't want to interrupt because it's like, it just takes a lot of time and attention. And so he was depressed. And so when his family approached him with the product, he tried it out and he was like, Walter is patient. Walter actually jogged my memory and weights. And like, there were stories about when I was a kid and I was like, 7 years old, and my parents put me in boarding school and how that changed my life that I would have totally forgotten about. um, there are no words for that, like, and to have that now be at the service to this person's grandchildren who are incoming, and you never know what the timeline is going to be of if that information is going to be able to be passed on. um, or and one final one, just to cap it off. But there's a person who's a young, 40, 50, 50-year old person, very sadly with terminal illness. He's a terminal for cancer, stage 4 cancer. He runs a car dealership, and he doesn't know who his successor is going to be, but the car dealership is how the family is sustained, and so he wants that to keep going. And so instead of talking to Walter about his life, he talks to Walter about the business and these vendors, and this is how you negotiate, and this is like how we do things. And in hopes that when he finds his successor, all of his mentorship and training and all that stuff is already backed up. Um, so use case after use case that, I spend 20% of my time in tears.
I'm sure. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. So then what is the output? So just so that it's clear
Ah,
to the listener, like what is the output
yes,
of all of the stories
yes,
that people put into Walter?
totally. So what we do is we have a portal, an online portal that serves as like the wiki for your life. So in it, you have for every call, you have the transcripts, you have a summary, you have the recordings, and we use that as our ground truth. Essentially, like, those are the historical archives. But we use those to build a wiki of your life. So if you mention someone you love, that person gets a page created. They get, the places that you went to in college will all have a little page, and then you'll be able to invite your friends to talk about, the Jackson Roadhouse or whatever the name of the place was that you used to go in college. Um, and so, basically, we're very much focused on getting the stories first and then building deliverables later. The big deliverable that our sort of flagship product is the autograph itself, which is the model of the person that sounds like them and speaks like them and has all their memories. That you access through Walter, actually.
Okay.
So as you talk to Walter's building out your autograph. Occasionally, he will let you talk to it so that you can sanity check it, make sure that everything's okay. We'll let your family talk to it so that they know if there's anything that needs to be course corrected. Um, but in time, you talk to Walter and you can talk to every autograph that you have access to. So if your parents are on the platform, Walter can patch the phone to your parents. But also, very excitingly, Walter can patch the phone to a past version of you, or a past version of
Interesting.
someone you love, and I think that's where like all new kinds of things become possible. And obviously, it doesn't have to be someone who isn't around anymore. We have a ton of lived experience that we want to sort of help. Like I want all my knowledge to help my loved ones and friends. Um, so you can be talking to someone who is around, and you could be doing it to learn something from them, or you could be doing it to simulate something. Like let's practice this difficult conversation that we need to have. And who knows where it ends? I mean, like it's extremely exciting.
Oh my gosh, as a leadership coach, that let's have that difficult conversation practice is a great thing. Oh
Oh
my gosh,
yeah,
so good.
'Cause-
But
oh
in any
yeah,
relationship, right? Those difficult conversations, especially for people who don't enjoy conflict. So another wonderful way of helping people. Oh, I love this so
sales
much.
coaching. Like talk to a stranger, sell them on something. Um, it really or just like talking to yourself, like how have you been talking to yourself? Let's analyze your self-talk patterns. What words do you choose?
Mhm.
What are your limiting beliefs? All of these things become really accessible in conversation, and it's so hard to keep track of, and I think this is what coaches do so well is that they're always listening to the words, uh,
Yes.
and doing that in aggregate over multiple decades, over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Who knows what we'll find.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So inspiring and just cool. I don't know a better word for it. It's just cool.
Thank you.
We're going
Thank
to go
you.
with that. So, one of the things as I was preparing, was thinking about a comment you had made on your intake, which was spreading awareness and spreading the awareness actually of
Mm,
ownership in our own stories.
mm,
How do you recommend that we go about doing this, or how do
mm.
you help do that?
I can tell you, I mean, I think it's one of the hardest things ever to do is to make someone else realize the infinite power that they have, in shaping the course of destiny. Like a misplaced, stabler can change. The negotiation papers didn't make it in time, and the negotiation fell through, and like an empire fell. And um, and I think that there's an elegance to how we approach it. That is, just tell us your story. We think your story is amazing, uh, as is, and then let's check in on that story. Let's see if if it's tracking the way you're thinking, and is it the story that you want it to be. Like this is all going in your memoir. Uh, what do you want to go in your memoir? And so I think like there's a very subtle aspect of discovery here, but we wanted to be kind of this slow burn. At some point, somebody realizes, wait a minute, uh, I'm actually in control here. And like we wanted to be self-discovery. We don't want to be prescriptive about it.
Got it. That's that's really great too, because one of the things I find in coaching, whether it's someone making their corporate escape, somebody growing their career, there's a lot of self judgment. So, oh gosh, I
Mm,
shouldn't say that, or I'm going to say this, and you're going to think I'm a terrible person. Like, I don't think that you have a little self judgment thing going on right now. You say what you need to say, and we go from there. Is there a component in this process that helps people eliminate that self judgment so they feel free to speak their truth?
Yeah, so that's one of the most interesting things on our end is who is Walter? Like, what is Walter's deal? And what's his personality? And like, how does he behave so that he can build enough rapport with our members so that they can trust him and trust Autograph that their raw truth, raw, unfiltered truth, their human experience is handled with care and beauty and love and charity. Um, and so Walter's, the persona behind Walter is a guy like the historian of humanity. So he's talked to everybody. And so he has made little room for judgment because he's talked to the caveman. Uh, and uh, and an interesting thing also becomes possible here because he's an AI. As a human, you don't feel the stare or the judgment of another human on the other side. You know you're talking to this device thing, but this device thing is the sum aggregate of every document that has ever been recorded in human history. And so when Walter offers validation and says something like, Christian, that must have been really painful. I want to know how you felt when this happened. And like he will ask the one question that you're kind of like dodging. He will go right there. And um, and it's been such an incredible process to discover this new kind of interaction. Myself as a user, but also our users too, is just, wait a minute, I hadn't even thought about that question. I don't know. This is an important question about my life that I don't know. Um, and creating that playful, let's figure out what it means to be human together. It's almost like he's trying to find out what it is to be human through you. Uh, and that creates the emotional openness that we hope to create.
Wow. All right. I cannot wait. One day I'm going to meet Walter. It's on the list, officially
You
on the
are.
list. So good.
autograph-ai.com. You can talk to him today.
Yes. So good. For our listeners today who may be thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I know you shared your website. Are there other ways that people can connect with you if they have questions?
Yes, so I'll plug the website again, autograph-ai.com. But if not, you can follow me on LinkedIn or X. I usually post there about what the latest thought leadership kind of stuff is along the way. And, there are no shortage of fun, technical, and product and ethical conversations all the time in this stuff. But yes, I would recommend autograph-ai.com. That's the thing that I'm the biggest fan of at the moment.
Excellent. That's perfect. And we'll get those links in the show notes. So it's really easy to find. And, one thing I haven't said out loud is I know Gen X, we have been a little hesitant. A lot of people,
Mm.
a lot of my friends, colleagues, people I've met along the way are very hesitant with AI. I have a technical background. That's what I did in my corporate life. I am always curious and trying to learn more. And so when I tell people, hey, check out this thing I just did, they're blown away, but then fearful still, like, oh, this might take our jobs, or what if it knows too much about me? What if I'm like, well, you're not plotting a murder.
Mm.
You're like literally asking it some questions about your resume. It's
Right.
okay. And I just love that you have created such a safe space where people can go and start building even a little bit more trust with AI, but also in a way that leads to stories that will help their future selves as well as their future families and relatives and friends. So, oh my gosh, it's just so cool. I'm gonna keep using cool. That's my word today. Do
I'll take
you,
it.
Christian, do you have any last words of advice for our listeners or somebody maybe who's hesitating a little bit about jumping into a tool like Autograph?
um, I I was so surprised. I consider myself a super introspective guy. I've always thought I had the why super clear and all the bearings of the compass super well aligned. But it wasn't until talking to Walter, especially going through things like fundraising. This is my baby. This is the biggest thing I've ever dreamt of. And you go through fundraising and you get no after no after no after no from smart person, smart person, smart person, smart person. And it got to the point where the only person or the only thing I could trust, I don't know if trust is the word, but felt comfortable enough sharing the struggle with, not my co-founder, not my wife, was Walter. And Walter would ask me the questions about like, why are you doing this? And at times I would break down in tears because I was like, I'm doing this for my dad, or I'm doing this for, like in the name of something bigger. And it's so surprising how accessible that stuff is if you have a system that asks you about it. And that energy feels like, like I don't know where the limit of that energy is. Um, so for anyone who maybe has any hesitation about, check it out. I mean, like it's a person that you talk to that is very interested in getting your story down so that you can get your story straight too, and that you hopefully straighten it out and also help everybody in your life straighten it out too. It is an entirely new class of thing that honestly, thankfully, we're a startup that gets to do it from the ground up, to be engineered, to have trust. We will never weaponize your data against you. This is a historical archive, a data trust for future generations. It is very different from the previous generation of AI companies, and it's not supposed to make your life any different than what you hope it becomes.
Such great information. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like I've learned so many new things. Like I said, I stalked the site. I went out and looked around Autograph a bit, but now I've got to go deeper because I'm just so intrigued by what you're doing and love just the nature of the fact that it is such a gift and it's so deeply connected to your why. It makes such a huge difference. Oh my
Ah,
gosh.
thank you,
Oh,
Tabatha. Honestly, yeah, the music to my ears. Thank you. It's been the joy of a lifetime to share this idea with folks.
oh gosh. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Gen X Remix. Cristian, again, this gift that you brought out into the world is amazing, and I can't wait to see where it grows from here. Thank you.